So there's the welcome, and then the... You may... Good morning, Unitarian Universalists of Sarasota and Lakewood Ranch, and any visitors joining us this morning. I'm Beth Meller, one of the associate ministers here, and I welcome you to today's service, whether you're viewing it with us live here this morning or at a later date on the recording. In any case, welcome. We do have a technical problem here in the sanctuary this morning. There apparently was a leak that disabled most of our cameras, and so you will only see one angle, this angle, today, and we are going to be able to get that fixed in the next few days, we hope. If you're visiting us today, we're glad you're here and hope that you'll come back. If you haven't already found it, take a look at the visitors page on our website, accessible from the home page. Follow the links to find lots of information about this church and about Unitarian Universalism. Sign up for our weekly newsletter called Contact, and also to receive our email invitations to the various Zoom programs we have during the week. And if you have questions or you want to talk to one of our ministers, our contact information is also on that home page. Just scroll down to where you see pastoral care and connection, and you'll find ways to get in touch with all of us. Joining me in offering our service this morning are the Reverends Doug Wadkins, our interim senior minister, and Bud Friend Jones, our other associate minister, and Catherine Bonner, director of religious education. Today's music includes Don Bryn on piano, although you won't be able to see him on camera because he's in another part of the building or the room here. And we have some pre-recorded hymns, one by Robert Lischetti, our music director, and the Masked Choir, and one from the UUA General Assembly. I hope you'll enjoy the music this morning. And we are most grateful to our marvelous tech team, Klaus Obermeit and Doug Caldwell. Again, welcome. We're glad you're joining us, and I hope you find today's service meaningful. And now, please enjoy our prelude music with some printed announcements. As we light our chalice this morning, hear these words called Open to Unexpected Answers by Julianne Lepp. A large gray rock is cracked down the middle where many small, colorful stones are caught. We seek our place in the world and the answers to our heart's deep questions. As we seek, may our hearts be open to unexpected answers. We light the chalice this morning in recognition of Unitarian Universalism's fourth principle. We covenant to affirm and promote a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. May the light of our chalice remind us that this is a community of warmth, of wisdom, and welcoming of multiple truths. So may it be.
A while ago, when this topic of sources of hope and healing were set out, I got to thinking about how I could share my thoughts with you and our younger UUs. Of course, at that point, we all thought we would be here together. Darn you, COVID. So my time for all ages today was built upon doing a demonstration with younger UUs out of the audience. Well, my only audience today are Reverend Doug and Reverend Beth and Reverend Bud. So I'm going to invite them to come up to be our participants today, and you just have to pretend they're a little bit younger. Okay. Ouch. All right, there's your two. Don't show. There's your two, and there's your two. Okay, so when I think of sources of hope and healing, I think of a place that makes me feel warm and secure, a place where I can be myself, where I can share my questions, my joys, my concerns, and even my sorrows without being trampled on, where people will listen to me, give me support, and then share their experiences and their ideas too. And often this place is where we live, but I also think, and maybe you do too, that this place is also my church. This is my spiritual home. So what makes this a spiritual home? Well, I like symbolism, so this is where our volunteers come in. I want each of them to turn around their pieces of the building that they hold and tell you what parts they have.
I have a door, and I have windows.
Door and windows, all right.
Let's see, I have the bathroom, and I have a wall.
Awesome.
And I have the roof and the floor.
Okay, so this question is for all of you. Which of these pieces, and it doesn't have to be the piece that you're holding on to, is the most important part of a building and why?
Well, I think the floor is the most important, because without the floor, we would just sink and go down, 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 down. I like the floor.
Good question, good answer.
I probably would not have said this before looking at the ones that I have, but I would actually go with the bathroom. And I'm reminded that in other places, when the bathroom does not work, we've had to stop the service on Sunday. And what I take from that is that unless we're taking care of some of our very basic needs, and that's true in the world as well, we can't do anything else. We can't concentrate on anything else. And so it's important that we're aware of each human being having what the basic needs that they need, and then we go from there.
Good answer. Beth?
Well, I would have said the roof, because the roof's important to keep us dry and protected from the heat. But hearing what Doug just said, I kind of think I want to agree with him. We do need to take care of our basic needs and provide for that so that we can truly be a community and not just a commercial gathering of random folks.
Well, I like all of those answers, but that's not the answer that I came up with. So this was kind of a trick question because the answer is not one of these things up here. So can you guys guess what it might be?
Well, I don't know, would you call the people part of the building? I would say the people.
Okay. People make part of the building. I'll go with that.
Maybe the ideals that gather us as a people.
Okay. Beth?
I'm going to go with the people, too. I think the people are the most important part.
Okay, so all of those are wonderful answers. Once again, there's no right or wrong answers, but my answer is the foundation. The foundation is the most important part of a building because it ties everything together. It ties all these parts together and all the parts that they mentioned, and it grounds us so that we don't fall down. So all the places that you can shelter have them. So a building has a concrete slab, a tent may not have a floor, but they have guidelines that stake out the tent. A mobile home Well, it might be mobile. When it's stationary, it's got hurricane straps and all kinds of things tying it down to the ground. So what grounds do our spiritual home have? Well, for those are our principles. Those are the principles of our faith. And especially the one I like is the one that we talked about today in our chalice lighting, which really kind of sets us off from other faiths, which is that we have the responsible and individual right to search out for truth and meaning for ourselves in our spirituality, in our lives, and in our world. So as we listen to today's sermon, or if you decide to join us for the RE Zoom call at 11 o'clock, remember your faith foundations. These are the sources of our hope and our healing. So thank you for my volunteers here, and let us now sing together our hymn 1028, Fire of Commitment.
Barbara Kingsolver observed in Animal Dreams, the very least you can do in your life is to figure out what you hope for. And the most you can do is to live inside that hope. Not admire it from a distance, but live right in it, under its roof. What I want is so simple I almost can't say it. Elementary kindness. Enough to eat, enough to go around. The possibility that kids might one day grow up to be neither the destroyers nor the destroyed. And that's about it. Right now, I'm living in that hope. I'm running down its hallway and touching the walls on both sides. Let us continue in our worship with some time of silence for centering and for meditation. We'll conclude the silence by singing together, Spirit of Life.
We begin our deeper reflection of today's theme with the writing of Doug Mutter, who is a journalist who used to write for The World magazine and is a Unitarian Universalist. He wrote this: "When I first found Unitarian Universalism, I was happy just to be here. I was in my early 30s when I wandered into one of those historic New England church on the town green and attended my first Unitarian Universalist Sunday service. The first reading was from Bertrand Russell, and I was sold right there. I'd grown up in a church where readings had to come from the Bible, and sermons almost never quoted anyone who wasn't from our Lutheran sect. I liked the idea of a church where you could read anybody, a church that didn't wall itself off from the world's wisdoms. And for a long time, that was enough. I came back Sunday after Sunday. I liked the sermons, and I heard more readings from Rumi and Lao Tzu and the Bhagavad Gita, with just enough Hosea, Amos, and Matthew mixed in that I didn't feel like my upbringing had been completely wasted." And he goes on to talk about how much he also loved the discussion groups and how people did not always agree with each other. And sometimes his own mind was changed by the conversations that they had. And that he was comforted that when he changed his mind, he didn't have to change his religion, that he was able to be free. And he said, "I liked that part best. I loved my UU freedom, and I used it. I meditated like a Buddhist, philosophized like a Stoic, speculated like a Kabbalist, cast circles like a pagan, and called myself a Unitarian Universalist. Asking what it meant to be a UU was, at least for me, the wrong question. It meant being one of the people I saw every Sunday at my church. It meant trying to be a good person, trying to make sense of the world, and being willing to challenge any assumptions or preconditions that might get in the way of that search of truth. But for a long time, that was enough. But then gradually, and I can't point to any specific event, it stopped being enough. I started wanting more from Unitarian Universalism, more than just the people I could hang with, more with the umbrella under which I gathered my religious smorgasbord. And at this point, it was where my non-UU friends began to feel vindicated. My problem, they were certain, was that Unitarian Universalism didn't mean anything because it wasn't a real religion. Religions have doctrines and teachings and boundaries you can't cross. If you wanted meaning, you would have to be a Buddhist, a Stoic, a Kabbalist, or a pagan, not just borrow the parts of them that suited my purpose. I couldn't have both, meaning and freedom, because meaning comes from commitment. Meaning rises out of the sacrifice of freedom. He says he had to think more deeply about what it meant to go more profoundly into Unitarian Universalism. And what he decided was that it was essential for him to explore the theology of Unitarian Universalism. Now, Unitarian Universalism and theology, we don't really have that, do we? Isn't the theo part of the word about God? And it is true that in the original idea, theology was our thinking about God. But we also these days understand that theology is much broader than that as well. It is our rational and heartfelt interpretation of religious faith and practices of experience. It is our expression of our lived experience and seeing within it some deeper and, I would say, sacred meaning that flows through it all. It is a contemplation of a faith that seeks understanding, which is a central component of Unitarian Universalism. I believe in many ways that Doug was right. We have to delve more deeply into both our tradition of theology, but also our own theologies and our communal understanding of what is deeper and truer. And why is that especially important and matter deeply now? Well, number one, it is not a new challenge, but in this time in particular, good theology really helps us in complicated and divisive times. It has always been about looking at the world as it is and then deciding what we must do. but by reflecting on it in a way that carries us into a fuller sense of the truth around us, that gives us a way to reflect into it with greater depth and draws upon the past, really centers us in the present and has us look towards the future. All of that is essential, especially now, if we are to find real sources of our healing and our hope. We need things that draw from very resilient sources. Number two, we are not alone on this journey, and understanding something about theology helps us be in dialogue with the world around us. A dialogue that can help us all grow and assist us in being each other's helpers. Three, the Unitarian Universalist tradition has emphasized the importance of us bringing intelligence to all components of our faith. And so exploring this invites us to lean into the greater wisdom and into an ongoing conversation that gets us out of just our own thoughts, but asks us always to listen to the thoughts in the world around us. And finally, it asks us to think more broadly and more deeply about who we are as Unitarian Universalists. And it gives us a larger map to help us understand the terrain. Doug Mutter concluded that in order to go deeper into his faith, he needed to read people like William Ellery Channing, Hosea Ballou, Ralph Waldo Emerson, James Luther Adams, Sophia Lyons Foz, Paul Rasser, Rebecca Parker, and from each of these to understand more deeply what their thoughts and his own thoughts were saying about the world now. He writes, "What I found in short was the import of that deceptively simple phrase, living tradition. I had always understood the living part. Individuals and generations have to confront the challenges of their own eras and need to be free to learn and grow and adapt. That's why our faith can never be cut and dry, never boiled down to a formula. But what I hadn't understood was the tradition, or even why it was important to have one. To a certain extent, we do make up Unitarian Universalism as we go along, but we don't make it up out of nothing. And if we try to make it out of nothing, we impoverish ourselves, because there is so much to work with if only we knew about it and drew from it. And it also often asks us to lean into the places that make us uncomfortable about our past, ideas that challenge us, and rather than dismissing them quickly, to see how they may speak to us now and in greater truth. So in a few moments, I'll invite us to look at a model that invites us to explore theological ideas in a Unitarian Universalist context. But first, we are beginning to integrate back into the service a time of offertory. And that is both a time for us to reflect on the importance of our generosity, as well as an opportunity for us to be generous. I hope that you will note that on our homepage there is a donate button. We will also be working on ways that you are able to be generous without having to leave this page. But for now, I hope you will make a special effort to donate generously to help support the ongoing work of this congregation. We'll now have a musical reflection from Don Brin. So if Unitarian Universalist theology is important to us at all times, but especially in finding our resilience, our hope, our healing, then it needs to be something that draws from a larger image. And so I'm using Rebecca Parker's house model of theological concepts and terms. Now, she was inspired by an interpolation of the first grade haunting house curriculum by Barbara Hollerworth that developed a philosophy that we are all seeking our place to, quote, be at home in our individual lives, in the community, in the church, in the world, in the universe. And Parker expands on that felt need to be at home, giving us an understanding of our theological place in history, that we Unitarian Universalists have a place in the religious realm with a distinctive history, and we are the inheritors of that history and that religious theology. So in our theology, we are looking for things that are both simple and direct and authentic in our lives, but we're also looking, as that image suggests, at something that is more complete, that addresses larger questions, and not just in one realm of our lives and our shared life, but in all sorts of realms. And as I've already said, often it is the places of discomfort or challenge that we may grow the most deeply, much like in life. When we are faced with things that trouble us, if we have ways to engage them more meaningfully, often how we understand them will change, and therefore how we deal with them will expand as well. So there are various components that this house metaphor raises up for us to think about. Here is the first one. First, we need a foundation, and that is theology. This is how we conceptualize the nature of what it means to be human and our relationship with what is ultimate. For some of us, that is God, and for others of us, it is not. But it speaks to our answers to eternal questions that transcend one particular place or time, and sometimes our individuality altogether. Questions like, who am I? Why am I? Are we here? What happens when we die? Why are things like they are? And the proverbial, is that all there is? One of our forebears, Paul Tillich, wrote this: theology moves back and forth between two poles, the eternal truth of its foundations and the temporal situation in which the eternal truths must be received. So it asks us to keep an eye on that which does not change, but always in light of the time and place we are now. The second area that it calls us to look at, this house metaphor, are the walls. And she says that this stands for our ecclesiology, a big word, but it is that which holds us together and that which embraces us. Now, a more traditional definition of ecclesiology would be an exploration of what it means to be a community of faith, its nature, function, and constitution. And that is certainly part of what we explore as we think about it as well. But for Unitarian Universalists, it raises questions like, how shall we relate to each other? Who will we include as part of this congregation? Why do we gather as a community of faith? What is distinctive about our gathering and is reflected? Who is my community? And with whom do I really feel that I belong? That whole question that we have been grappling with in the last few months about who it is that we want to be as a congregation. Do we want to focus more on, for instance, retirees that move to Sarasota? Or do we want to find ways to more intentionally and successfully reach out to all ages? That is an example of a major grappling with ecclesiology. Our own Mark Bellatini wrote this poem that reflects in the poetry some understanding theologically of what our ecclesiology might say. He writes, "Splendor of the spring world, uplift me. Peonies, you slow-motion fireworks, beguile me. Sunday sky, the color of a newborn's eyes, regard me. Starry night, the color of opals strewn across rain-soaked earth, enchant me. Fields of spring sweetening the air, calm me. All you realities of the spring world call to me. Man on the street corner talking to himself beguile me, no less than the peonies. Woman recovering slowly from deep hurt move me, no less than the expansiveness of the sky. Child without either shoes or guidance, teach me. All you parts of nature, human and floral, elemental and mysterious, silence me." He suggests that our ecclesiology draws from all that is in all people, ultimately in understanding who we are as community. The next part of the metaphor is that we, third, need a roof. And she suggests that this is our soteriology. And for some Unitarian Universalists, it might also have to do with Christology as well. Soteriology is how we are protected or saved from that which we fear or that which can harm us. It is salvation both from and for something, And so more traditional theology would be an exploration of the different doctrines of salvation. And Christology would be understanding our own concept of Christ. And it would include the person of Jesus and his relationship with that Christ concept. But in our own tradition, it includes our thinking about what threatens to end our lives or suppress the essence of what is essential about our lives. It asks us to think about what would liberate us from this threat or help us not be paralyzed by the fear of that threat. Our salvation might be about how it is that we live our lives more fully and help other people do the same. So thinking about how we save ourselves and each other, and for that matter, this planet, or do our part in it, may be our own way of grappling with soteriology. Number 4 is we need windows. Windows invite us to look out into the world around us. It is our missiology, how we understand our relationship with and to our religious neighbors. It asks us to live into the question, what is our mission in the world? In some Christian traditions, originally missiology very specifically associated with our exploring of what it means to be missionaries on this planet and to do that work. But in all traditions, it has come to be a larger understanding. What is it that we are all here to do together? The word missiology, the Reverend Dr. Rebecca Parker reminds us, is from the same root as missive or message, the calling to bring something to others, to the world, and to receive as well what others bring to us. There are 2 alternatives before us, writes Clarence Russell Skinner. First, which is unlikely, is that we unscramble our modern interdependent culture, returning to separate and isolationist lives. Such a world would not demand greatness. The other alternative, he writes, is to expand our spiritual powers that we vastly increase the range of our understanding and sympathy. There is no middle way. The greatness, universalism, or perish. Our own tradition suggests that our missiology invites us to live into our seventh principle with greater depth, really all of our principles with greater depth. What does it really mean to be interdependent? And what is it asking of us in especially times like these? We certainly have seen what happens when people understand their own connection with the world in a very self-centered way. What does it mean if we really embrace a larger vision? Fifth, we need a door that enables us to come in and to go out. And she suggests that this helps us explore eschatology, or the place that opens upon that place which we will ultimately go to towards the end. In its original tradition, this theological term talked about the idea of what we think will bring about and what it will be like when the world as we know it ends. But what we've realized is that always that question is deeply tied to our own vulnerability, to our own fragility, to our own lives, and our own finitude. And so they're inextricably intermingled. The way that we understand our own place on this planet and what we understand to be true about the larger span of time are deeply interrelated. That's why throughout history, most human beings have felt that they've lived in a time where they question whether the end of the world was at hand. Because what we realize also is that so many things call us to reflect on our own fragility. And we see so many examples, large and small, around us, that it is natural for us always to wonder if the world may be quickly zooming towards some final completion. And if that is the case, what do we believe is the destiny of this world ultimately? Do we think that it is something finite, or do we believe that in some way the world will always reconstitute itself? Do we think that we will bring about the end of humanity? And if so, what are those implications for how we live? Is it that when we talk about the end of the world, we talk about the end of the human world or something larger? And what does my own fragility and the end of my time mean for my living and what it is that I want to do for this planet? Eschatology often asks us, rather than to live with the finality of it all, to be very intentional about what it calls us to do in light of the preciousness of the gifts that we've been given, of our life, of each other, of this planet. Margaret Atwood wrote her own reflection on eschatology in this poem. I see now I cannot see. Earth is a blizzard in my eyes. I hear now the rustle of the snow, the angels listening above me, thistles bright with sleet gathering, waiting for the time to reach me. Up to the pillared sun, the final city, or living towers unrisen yet, whose dormant stones lie folding their holy fire around me. But the land shifts with frost, and those who have become the stone, voices of the land, shift also and say, God is not the voice in the whirlwind. God is the whirlwind. At last, judgment, we will all be trees. One reflection out of many. Sixth, we have pneumatology, an exploration of how we understand that which surrounds us. And it reminds us that in the original language, breath and air and spirit all have very similar roots. And so how is it that we understand our relationship with those things more ephemeral, maybe for some of us more mystical? What does it mean when we refer to things like the spirit of the land or the human spirit? What are we really talking about? And in traditional religion, what does it mean to have the Holy Spirit in your midst? What are we really talking about there? Always it asks us to think about our relationship with that which is perhaps more difficult for us to place our hands on or to know with certainty. How do we deal with ambiguity? How is it that we live with the ways that things that are not easily measured impact the deepest parts of who we are? It may also ask us to think about what is our source of inspiration. Is there an active force in the world that fosters meaningful spiritual experiences? What is the essence of spirituality, and what is the essence of spirit? Sometimes I like to think about that when someone is in a place and they have this intuitive sense of a feeling in the air, what is it that they're really connecting with there? Is it only their own thoughts, their own experience, or is there something that transcends us, that actually exists in space and time? Hildegard of Bingen wrote a lot about her connection with the Spirit. She wrote, "I am the one whose praise echoes on high. I adorn all the earth. I am the breeze that nurtures all things green. I encourage the blossoms to flourish with ripening fruits. I am led by the Spirit to feed the purest streams. I am the rain coming from the dew that caused the grasses to laugh with the joy of life. I am the yearning for good." So we take each of those components of this theology, and together they create not only a foundation for our lives, but a way of looking at almost all that we are. This time calls for clarity. It calls for us to have a sense of what our priorities are. It certainly calls for us to find our resilience. If we are to connect with our sources of healing and hope, if we are to find ourselves most at home within ourselves, with each other on this planet, we need to draw from all of the resources, understand them more deeply, lean into them so that they may be for us both strength and clarity and power when we need it most. We need to explore our own theology as Unitarian Universalists and let that exploration transform our understandings of how we will act in the world now in this time when it is so needed. May that be part of our work together. May we remember those that came before us who live in us still. May you join us in our closing hymn, taken from our gathering of Unitarian Universalists across the country at our General Assembly, and led by the author of the song, Issei Bardenwell, number 1051, We Are.
For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. Oh, for each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. Oh, for each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. We are our grandmother's prayers, and we are our grandfather's dreamings, and we are the breath of our ancestors. We are the Spirit of God. We are mothers of courage, fathers of time, daughters of dust, and the sons of great visions. We're sisters of mercy, brothers of love, lovers of life, and the builders of nations. We're seekers of truth, keepers of faith, makers of peace, and the wisdom of ages. We are our grandmother's prayers. We are our grandfather's dreamings, and we are the breath of our ancestors. We are the Spirit of God. We are mothers of courage, fathers of time, daughters of dust, and the sons of great visions, we're sisters of mercy, brothers of love, lovers of life, and the builders of nations. We're seekers of truth and keepers of faith. We are makers of peace and the wisdom of ages. We are our grandmother's prayers. We are our grandfather's dreamings, and we are the breath of our ancestors. We are the Spirit of God. We are our grandmother's prayers, and we are our grandfather's dreamings. We are the breath of our ancestors. We are the Spirit of God. For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. We are one.
As we prepare to end our service, I hope you will return to your own candle or chalice, and as we say our closing words and extinguish our chalice here, you will do the same at home. Now, as we get ready to leave this time of worship together, may we remember that we are all, each in our own way, seeking to be more at home. May we recall also that there is no way to be really at home in our own lives without a deeper understanding of what it means to be connected and to foster a sense of home for us all. May that quest for that experience of home lead us forward into this time with greater depth, compassion, and life. We extinguish this chalice, but not the light of the larger wisdom, not the fire of our commitment to what matters most in our lives, not the warmth of human community and the power of love. These things will remain until we gather together again. Thanks for joining us for our worship today. We look forward to seeing you next week. Have a great week between.